Have you ever gotten a parking ticket and thought it was the worst thing ever? Well, get ready to feel a lot better about your life. Today, we're diving deep into the bizarre, brutal, and sometimes downright baffling world of medieval punishments. These aren't your typical stocks and pillories. We're talking about punishments so strange you'll wonder how anyone ever came up with them. So grab your popcorn, because things are about to get weirdly historical. Let's start with something that sounds almost poetic. It's called pona-kale, or the punishment of the sack. This was reserved for one of the most heinous crimes in ancient Rome. Later adopted in parts of medieval Europe, parricide, the killing of a parent or close relative. The convicted person was sewn into a leather sack. Sounds bad enough, right? Oh, but they weren't alone in there. They had company: a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey. The sack was then sealed and thrown into a river or the sea. The idea was that the person who had rejected human society deserved to die deprived of the elements earth, air, fire, and water in the company of animals. The logic? It's a bit murky. Maybe the animals symbolized different vices, or maybe it was just a way to make a terrible death even more terrifying. Either way, it's a truly horrifying cocktail of cruelty. Next up, let's talk about trial by ordeal. Forget innocent until proven guilty. In the Middle Ages, it was more like innocent if you survived this incredibly painful and dangerous test. This was basically leaving the verdict up to God. One of the most common forms was trial by hot iron. The accused had to carry a red-hot piece of iron for a set distance. Their hand was then bandaged, and everyone would wait for 3 days. When the bandages were removed, if the wound was healing cleanly, God had declared them innocent. If it was infected and festering, which it almost always was, they were guilty. Talk about a no-win situation. You could be completely innocent, but if you didn't have a superhuman immune system, you were doomed. It was a judicial system based on faith and, let's be honest, a complete lack of understanding about germs. Now, imagine being punished for gossip, not with a stern talking to, but with a horrifying metal mask. Meet the scold's bridle, also known as the brank. This was a metal cage that was locked onto a person's head, usually a woman accused of nagging, gossiping, or just speaking out of turn. The worst part was the bridle bit, a small metal plate, often spiked, that was inserted into the mouth and pressed down on the tongue. This made it physically impossible to speak. The scold would then be paraded through the town, humiliated and in pain, sometimes with a bell attached to the bridle to attract even more attention. It was a tool not just for punishment, but for public shaming and silencing, designed to enforce social norms about how women should behave. It's a chilling reminder of how speaking your mind could land you in literal iron. Let's move from public humiliation to public intoxication, but not in the fun way. Picture this: you've had a bit too much to drink, and your punishment is to be strapped into something called the drunkard's cloak. This wasn't a cloak at all. It was a heavy, smelly wooden barrel. They decut a hole in the top for your head and 2 on the sides for your arms. You were then forced to walk through the streets wearing this ridiculous, uncomfortable barrel while everyone pointed and laughed. The idea was to shame you out of your drinking habits. While it's certainly less brutal than some of the others on our list, can you imagine the sheer embarrassment? It's like being forced to wear a giant wooden "I messed up" sign for the whole town to see. And you thought a hangover was bad enough. Here's a punishment that seems to misunderstand the crime entirely: being buried alive. This was a fate reserved for a surprising range of offenses in different parts of medieval Europe. In some places, it was the punishment for female thieves, while male thieves were hanged. Why the difference? It's hard to say for sure. In other regions, it was the punishment for a mother who killed her own infant. The logic, twisted as it was, might have been a dark parallel. As she put her child into the earth, so too would she be put into the earth. It's a punishment that's not just about death, but about a slow, terrifying, suffocating end, trapped beneath the ground. It's one of the most psychologically disturbing methods of execution imaginable. Now, for a punishment that targeted your livelihood and social standing. Civil death. This wasn't a physical punishment, but a legal one. If you were declared civilly dead, you lost all of your rights as a citizen. You couldn't own property, you couldn't inherit anything, you couldn't sign a contract, and you couldn't testify in court. Your marriage was dissolved, and your children were considered orphans. You were, for all intents and purposes, a ghost in your own life. You were still breathing, but your place in society was completely erased. This was often a punishment for serious crimes like treason or for joining a monastery without the crown's permission. It was a way of utterly destroying a person without laying a hand on them, proving that the most profound punishments aren't always the most violent. Let us talk about a punishment that's just plain bizarre: the Judas cradle. This was a pyramid-shaped seat on top of a wooden tripod. The victim would be lowered by ropes onto the sharp point of the pyramid. The point was meant to be inserted into the victim's sensitive areas. The goal wasn't necessarily to kill, but to inflict agonizing pain and stretch the body for days on end, often leading to severe infections. It was a torture device designed for interrogation, but its sheer cruelty places it firmly in the category of insane punishments. The public and unsanitary nature of the device meant that even if someone survived the cradle itself, they often died later from the resulting injuries and infections. It's a testament to the horrifying creativity of medieval torturers. Have you ever heard of the stocks? Sure you have. But have you heard of the barrel pillory? It's similar to the drunkard's cloak, but often with a more disgusting twist. A person who committed a crime like selling spoiled food or watered-down beer might be forced into a barrel, filled with whatever they were selling. Imagine being trapped in a barrel of rotten fish on a hot day while the entire town walks by to mock you. It was punishment and poetic justice rolled into one stinking package. This wasn't just about humiliation. It was about sensory assault. The stench, the discomfort, and the public ridicule were meant to be an unforgettable lesson. From barrels to boats. Let's look at the boat. No, not a pleasant cruise. This was a Persian punishment later described by the Greeks, and it is stomach-churning. The victim was placed inside a narrow boat or a hollowed-out tree trunk, with another one placed on top, sealing them inside. Only their head, hands, and feet stuck out. They were then force-fed a mixture of milk and honey until they developed severe diarrhea. More honey was then slathered all over their exposed face and limbs to attract insects. They were then left floating on a stagnant pond or in the sun. The combination of filth, dehydration, and insects feasting on them would lead to a slow, agonizing death from septic shock and gangrene. It's a method so gruesome it's hard to believe it was ever real. So, from being sewn into a sack with animals to being legally erased from existence, the medieval world certainly had a unique and terrifying approach to justice. It makes you realize that our modern legal systems, for all their flaws, are a massive step up. The next time you feel like complaining about jury duty or a fine, just remember, at least you not being forced to wear a barrel of rotten eggs or carry a bar of red-hot iron. Thanks for joining me on this trip back to the darker side of history. If you found this as fascinating and horrifying as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the weird and wild parts of our past. Let me know in the comments which of these punishments you found the most mind-boggling. See you next time.